Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into an extraordinary place, Cape Verde,
Hmm.
an archipelago off West Africa, often, misunderstood or maybe just overlooked.
Absolutely. And it has this really unique story, doesn't it? Resilience, cultural fusion, and surprising political stability.
Exactly. We've gathered a stack of sources, historical accounts, socioeconomic analyses, cultural studies, basically trying to figure out how this small nation, born from volcanoes, settled by Portuguese and West Africans,
Yeah.
how it forged this distinct identity.
Yeah, our mission here is really to explore how Cape Verde navigated, well, immense challenges. Things like slavery, those persistent droughts we hear so much about,
Right.
and how it achieved this, frankly, remarkable stability and keeps evolving today.
So what are the surprises? What nuggets are we going to unearth about this journey, from uninhabited rocks to a beacon of democracy?
Well, let's start at the beginning, the foundation, the land, the sea, the very first settlements.
Okay, geography first. It's about, 600 kilometers off the southwest coast of West Africa.
Right in the tropics.
And what's striking, you mentioned, is how this location, seemingly isolated, became this crucial crossroads.
Precisely, between North and South America, Africa, Europe. A really strategic spot.
And the islands themselves?
Yeah.
Quite varied.
Oh, incredibly diverse. You've got 3 mountainous ones, Santiago, Santo Antão, San Vicente,
Okay.
and then 5 that are more low-lying islets.
Yeah.
And they're all volcanic. That's key.
Volcanic origin, like Fogo Island with the Peak of Kanja.
Exactly, soaring up
Yeah.
to 2,829 meters. It really speaks to the raw power that shaped this land and its people's story, really.
And the climate adds another layer to that story, right?
Yeah.
Mostly dry shrubland.
Predominantly, yes. It's defined by extremes, long droughts, then punctuated by heavy rain, usually August to October.
And temperatures. Pretty steady.
Yeah, average between about 21 and 24.5 Celsius.
Mm.
But those Atlantic trade winds, they're constant.
You can almost feel it. Imagine the challenges just living there.
Which leads us to something kind of unexpected, bit of a mystery around its pre-colonial origins.
Oh, what kind of mystery?
Well, the sources point to this debate. How did the islands even form? Some historians say volcanic eruptions around 1460.
Okay.
Others argue for much older tectonic plate collisions. And this uncertainty, it kind of complicates understanding the early ecology, any potential settlement.
That is fascinating. So even though it's close to the mainland,
Relatively close, yeah.
it didn't have rivers or easy ways for people or animals to get there.
Exactly. No natural corridors. So any early peopling must have been by sea.
Right. Do we have proof of that? Any evidence?
We do have some archaeological clues. Scattered pottery sherds, animal remains, sheep, goat, pig, cattle, horse, hare, even migratory birds.
Right.
It suggests some kind of occupancy before the Europeans arrived, but probably after late African contact. Not truly empty, perhaps, but not settled in a major way.
So effectively uninhabited when the Portuguese arrived.
That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah.
They were discovered, quote-unquote, by Portuguese sailors. Accounts credit Diogo Gomes in 1456.
Or Antonio de Noli, the Italian navigator.
Right, him, in 1460, working for Portugal. But initially, for like a quarter century, Portugal wasn't that interested.
Really? Why not?
Hard to say for sure, perhaps resource poor initially. But then Spain started showing interest.
Ah, competition.
Exactly. And that spurred Portugal to definitively claim them by royal order in 1494.
Okay, so Portugal lays claim, and then things change rapidly, right? Especially concerning the slave trade.
Dramatically.
Hmm.
Colonization really began in earnest with an expedition in 1462. This makes Cape Verde one of the earliest European colonial ventures in the tropics.
Wow. And Santiago and San Vicente were the first plantations.
That's right. And its location, perfect for the transatlantic slave trade, it quickly became a major hub.
Santiago, you mentioned, was key for supplying enslaved Africans.
A major port, yeah,
Yeah.
sending people to the Caribbean, South America. And to fuel this and the sugar plantations, they imported enslaved people from West Africa, São Tomé, Angola.
And other migrants, too.
Yeah.
From Senegal, the Gold Coast.
Right. A real mix of people, forced and otherwise, started arriving.
But here's where the story takes a really unique turn, according to our sources. It wasn't just simple subjugation.
No, not at all. What happened was this spontaneous creolization.
Creolization, meaning...
Slaves integrating with owners, intermingling, leading to a distinct Creole language, Creole, and a unique Cape Verdean cultural identity.
That's incredible. How did that integration actually work
Yeah.
in a colonial context.
It's fascinating. It led to what the sources call a social map of Trocadalo.
Trocadalo?
Yeah, think of it as social fluidity. The rigid racial categories you saw in other Portuguese colonies, whites, mulattoes, blacks, they were less fixed here.
So more movement between groups, less rigid boundaries.
Much more blending, yeah. It fundamentally shaped Cape Verdean identity. And importantly, this wasn't passive. The Creole population, shaped by this history, they partly directed a sort of de facto independence movement later on, recorded in their writing and folklore.
So, if I'm getting this right, despite the horrors of the slave trade, this unique Trocadalo system emerged, creating a different kind of colonial society. Did that affect how they interacted with the Portuguese authorities?
It certainly seems so. It meant the relationship with colonial power was negotiated differently, often culturally at first. But you're right, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Economically, things got tough.
A period of decline. When was this?
Late 16th century onwards. A big part of it was disruption from piracy, British, French, targeting Spanish and Portuguese ships.
Right, European war spilling over.
Exactly. Things like the Anglo-Dutch War, the 7 Years' War, it all made Atlantic trade much riskier, less profitable for Cape Verde by the 1750s.
And the environment didn't help either, did it? Those droughts and famines.
They're devastating, persisting well into the 19th century, made agriculture mostly a failure and pushed many Cape Verdeans towards migration.
Just a cycle of hardship.
It was. However, there was a significant economic revival in the 1860s.
Oh, what happened?
Steamships. The islands became a crucial coaling station.
Ah, technology shift.
Right. Trade shifted towards San Vicente. It transformed Cape Verde from just a Portuguese outpost into this bustling port city, attracting merchants from all over Europe and Africa.
But even with that revival, there were still challenges. Competition.
Definitely. Foreign competition, especially British and French firms, plus rising sugar production elsewhere. It really undermined the old sugar plantation economy.
And the abolitionist movement, how did that play in?
Tied into the expanding European capitalist system, it impacted the slave trade itself, restricted markets. It led to a kind of societal disintegration of the old economic model.
So, facing all this drought, famine, economic shifts, how did they possibly persevere?
It's remarkable. Our sources talk about Cape Verdeans developing these cultures of hunger.
Cultures of hunger, what does that mean?
Marked by endurance, resilience, hope, but also leading to significant emigration. People left for the Americas, Brazil, British West Africa.
And later Europe, Lisbon, Paris, Amsterdam.
Exactly. Rotterdam, Antwerp too. And the money sent back. The remittances became absolutely essential for survival for those who stayed.
That's humbling. Finding endurance and hope in the face of that. So economically, they shifted from a settler colony to more of a trade colony?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Benefiting from being a refueling stop, a coaling station, and later developing fisheries. But the sources are clear. Early industrialization was quasi-non-existent.
And infrastructure, communication between islands.
Difficult. Low investment. It remained a challenge.
Okay, so despite all these hardships, this unique blend of people, a distinct culture didn't just survive, it flourished.
Absolutely. And that's where you really see the heart of Cape Verdean identity. Take the Creole language.
Yes.
It became central, especially in poetry, like Eunice Umbelina's work. It fueled the first major literary movement, claridade.
Claridade, and early newspapers, too, in Creole.
Yeah, periodicals like A Voz de CV and Onos Raiz, they were bravely grappling with colonial critique, with identity, a real sense of self-emerging.
And music and dance, obviously huge, right?
Dominant. The most common way people expressed feelings, hopes, affections, often the music came directly from the dance forms.
And this concept of morabeza, more than just music.
Oh, much more. It's described as a way of being, a simplicity that comes from looking life constantly in the eyes, grounding everything in feelings, in hope, almost a philosophy.
Wow, that's powerful.
And you also have these ancient traditions like sfofar, a kind of improvisational storytelling, and dança dos paus, stick dances, deeply rooted in African heritage.
And rituals, too, libations.
Yes, pre-ceremony libations to the gods, sometimes involving aguardente, consumed during Creole storytelling sessions. It paints a vivid picture of their community life.
And we have to talk about the food, that blend of influences.
Definitely. African, Portuguese, Brazilian influences, creating this robust flavor profile. Corn is huge.
The base for cachupa and couscous.
Exactly. And salty fish is key for azaram.
Cachupa seems really special, though, more than just a dish.
It's become a powerful symbol of national identity, of togetherness. Even if it's not the single national dish, It's incredibly important.
Meant differently on every island in every family.
Countless versions. But it gathers people. The basic ingredients, local corn, milho panso, and beans, can feed a crowd.
And variations like cachupa rica with meat.
Right, with cow's meat, sausage, salted fish, or cachapinha, lighter, maybe no meat, more fresh vegetables. It's a microcosm of that cultural fusion we talked about.
It really sounds like it, and it perfectly illustrates that mixed blood identity concept you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. It's this multifaceted idea that creates new meanings of race for the Creole population. It's everywhere. Memoirs, collective memory, this deep melding of African and European ancestries.
And it shapes everything, identity across islands, classes, genders.
It seems to bridge those divides, yeah, forging this composite Cape Verdean ethnicity, which is all tied up with their history as these crucial global ports, these refueling stations.
Okay, so moving towards more modern times. Culturally rich, but the path to independence wasn't straightforward.
No, it's complex. Secret anti-colonial groups started popping up around 1957.
Inspired by broader movements.
Yeah, drawing inspiration from multinational movements involving Africans and Black Americans after World War II.
And the PAGC, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde.
Founded in late '56, and led by the very inspiring Dr. Amilcar Cabral, a Cape Verdean himself.
But initially, intellectuals saw themselves as part of the Portuguese Empire.
Some did, yes. But that view shifted. You started seeing student protests against the colonial regime, making connections with anti-colonial leaders in Europe.
Was the independence movement itself, violent compared to others?
Relatively mild, comparatively. But Portuguese repression under Caetano's regime, arbitrary arrests, torture definitely happened.
And that spurred armed resistance?
It did, from well-armed Cape Verdean and Guinean guerrillas. Eventually, Portugal was prompted to seek UN intervention.
And independence came when?
July 5th, 1975, with huge solidarity from the UN.
Which brings us to this really interesting point from the sources. How did Cape Verde manage to achieve such remarkable political calm afterwards? Peaceful power transfers, high voter turnout, especially compared to neighbors.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's quite extraordinary.
How did their governance evolve?
Well, it started with relatively unchallenged one-party rule by the PAICV, the successor to PAAC in Cape Verde.
Okay.
Then it shifted to a more fragmented multi-party system after the Movement for Democracy, the MPD, owned power in 1990.
But even with disagreements, jobs, housing democracy held. No major violence.
Pretty much. The sources describe it as bourgeois and traditional, where political opposition rarely spilled into violence.
And this idea of a meritocracy or competence elite, relatively free of corruption.
That's the reputation, yeah. Apparently this integrity among officials, the cooperation between parties, it created a stable environment.
And that attracted international aid. Billions for infrastructure.
Over $4 billion, according to the sources, which funded ambitious projects. But it wasn't easy initially after independence.
Right. Major socioeconomic problems.
Grave problems. They focused on agriculture first, but the drought hit hard, led to like 200% inflation. GDP per capita dropped significantly by 1991.
Ouch. But it rebounded, mid-90s onwards.
It did. Robust development. Real GDP grew at an impressive average rate, nearly 6% between 2000 and 2011.
Wow. What drove that growth?
Mostly the services sector. Transport, communications, and especially travel and tourism. A real shift away from subsistence farming.
Towards a more urban service economy.
Exactly. But challenges definitely persist.
Like what?
High unemployment is still an issue. Weak financial systems, really high electricity costs.
That must impact daily life hugely.
For families and businesses, absolutely. And a structurally uncomfortable trade balance. They rely heavily on imports.
Even with the currency pegged to the euro.
Even with that and trying to align with EU standards, it's tough.
So tourism became the big hope, a national priority.
Identified as such right from independence, yeah. And it really has transformed the economy, attracting a lot of foreign direct investment, especially on Sal Island.
But the environmental vulnerabilities, they never really went away, did they? The drought, food shortages.
A constant reality for centuries. That plus overgrazing, desertification.
Yeah.
It makes agriculture incredibly precarious. Even small climate shifts can trigger famines.
Yet, despite that vulnerability, they've become leaders in marine conservation.
It's really impressive. The close-knit nature of the islands maybe helps focus campaigns. They're right at the forefront of the global dialogue on marine protection.
And protecting land biodiversity, too.
Growing awareness there, yes. Significant efforts are underway creating protected areas, biosphere reserves, marine protected areas,
And plans for more.
an ongoing drive, yes. Organizations working with local communities, international partners, training Cape Verdeans, mapping seascapes, assessing species.
Focusing on places like San Nicolau for sea turtles.
Exactly. It's a globally significant site, especially
Yeah.
fox-billed turtles, the only known nesting site in Cape Verde for them, and they're critically endangered.
That's crucial work. What about their place in the world? Foreign policy.
After independence, they started with a very pragmatic bilateral approach, building relationships with development banks, councils.
Essential for aid, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Later, that expanded into multilateralism, raising their international profile.
Strong ties with Brazil and the EU.
Yes, strong cooperation with Brazil. And proactively engaging the EU, looking for association mechanisms.
And their role in Africa, it seems quite prominent.
Increasingly so. A founding member of the African Union in 2002. They were the first nation to hold the presidency of the Pan-African Parliament.
Really? That's significant.
Very. They also played a lead role in setting up the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries, the CPLP, and they actively promote African development and poverty reduction at the UN. Quite influential for a small island nation.
It absolutely is. So wrapping this up, what does this journey mean for us, for you listening? We've traced Cape Verde's evolution from, well, that description, barren and arid, unproductive rocks,
Right.
to what really seems like an astonishing success story in many ways, a testament to human ingenuity, to transnationalism.
Absolutely. Diverse communities not just surviving, but thriving against incredible odds.
And it's clearly not this simple, homogenous entity, colonial, creolized, insular that it's sometimes painted as.
Not at all. The history shows this really complex negotiation of identity, that mixed blood narrative, blending African and European roots, constantly reshaped by the diaspora and those who stay.
It's a long, winding path to understanding Cape Verde, isn't it? Touching on huge political structures, economic realities, natural challenges, all navigated by its people.
It really is.
Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps a provocative one. Despite the economic growth, the enviable political stability, especially in its region, Cape Verde still faces big challenges. Public debt, making sure development benefits everyone.
Real persistent issues.
So what lessons can we draw from this continuous effort? Balancing that offshore dream of the first world, as one source put it, with the reality of windswept stones and dry soil. What does this ongoing struggle for self-definition tell us about resilience, about the human spirit?